The league is staring at a problem nobody wants to say out loud. On the surface, the players' union looks unified, disciplined, and locked in. But that image hides a lot of stress under the hood. The strike authorization vote looked overwhelming. Almost everyone backed it. That sounds strong, but strength fades when money starts running dry. An article by the Sports Business Journal, talks between the WNBA and Players Association have stalled, and the union's, quote, upper hand at the bargaining table is slipping as soon as the players will be faced with the question of how long they can hold out. According to Bloomberg News, it is a necessary but dispiriting thought considering that the leverage, most of the league isn't getting off-season checks from outside leagues, they're not seeing six figures roll in over a short stretch. Instead, they're home doing the math, watching expenses stack up while the top-tier players stay financially steady. A recent Sports Business Journal report peeled the curtain back, and the timing couldn't be worse for the union. The breakdown shows leverage slipping, not because of bad strategy, but because of reality. This negotiation only works when the players can afford to wait. Caitlin Clark showed up, and they suddenly had some leverage in their pocket. Publicly, the Players Association is presenting a united front, but the outward appearance masks a complex private reality. Many players can afford to wait indefinitely. A lot of fans miss this part. The league's power spike came when Caitlin Clark entered the scene. Attention exploded. Tickets vanished. Media money poured in. That moment finally gave players a real seat at the table. But moments don't last forever. Momentum has a timer. Now look ahead to 2025. Around 54 of the league's top players, roughly one-third of rosters, are playing in Unrivaled. Unrivaled provides a lens for understanding the divide. This season, 54 top WNBA supers, about a third of the WNBA's active rosters in 2025, are participating in Unrivaled. For them, Unrivaled and its big paychecks of roughly $220,000 for an 8-week season are a nice cushion. That kind of money buys patience. The rest of the locker room doesn't have that buffer. They're grinding on an $80,000 base salary, trying to hold firm while the clock keeps moving. The players at the end of the bench live in a completely different world. The role players, the 11th and 12th spots on the roster, they don't have endorsement money coming in. They're not signed to unrivaled deals. They're the first ones who feel it when the checks stop clearing. This is where things start getting messy. Natasha Cloud has talked about this gap before, and it says a lot. The players who are locked into Unrivaled are insulated. And if we're being real, they're not stressing about the other 100 players across the league. If a lockout hits, they'll be fine. They can stretch the Unrivaled season, stack a little more cash, and keep hooping without skipping a beat. Life stays comfortable on that side. For everyone else, it's the opposite. Bills don't pause. Car notes still hit. Rent doesn't care about union votes. Pressure builds fast, and that loud 97% unity starts feeling shaky once real life kicks in. A big part of this comes down to ego and timing that never lined up. A lot of veteran players completely missed the NIL wave. They watched college athletes start pulling in serious money while they were overseas grinding for $70,000 a year. Then Caitlin Clark enters the league, and suddenly real money finally shows up. Media attention, new fans, actual leverage. For many of these vets, this feels like the one shot they'll ever get, so they're pushing hard, asking for 30% of gross revenue, a $10.5 million salary cap. The issue is simple: they might be pushing too far too fast, and the balance of power may not be where they think it is. The league's newest offer isn't the insult some people are making it out to be. The max salary would jump to $1 million, then climb past $1.3 million with revenue sharing baked in. On top of that, the league is putting roughly 70% of net revenue on the table over the life of the deal. The salary cap would open at $5 million in year one and rise as league money grows. Compared to where things sit now, that's a serious upgrade. Still, the union is pushing for more. The sticking point is how the money gets calculated. Players want their cut based on gross revenue, not net. That's not a small tweak. That's a structural shift that could cost the league hundreds of millions over time, and it changes the entire risk equation. Weeks away from delaying season. Despite releasing the schedule earlier this week, the WNBA likely needs to agree to a CBA by February to start the season on time. The WNBA wants everybody to believe the 2026 season will tip off on May 8th. It asserted as much with an announcement of a 44-game slate and a statement that explained in part the move was to allow, quote, essential planning to begin. The reality of where collective bargaining agreement negotiations stands paint a different. Now, zoom out and look at what's really on the line. According to reporting from Annie Costabile, the WNBA may only be weeks away from delaying the season, even though the schedule just dropped. 44 games are supposed to tip off starting May 8th. Behind the scenes, the situation looks way less organized.
As of January 23rd, the Players' Union was still waiting for a response from the league on a proposal they sent almost a month earlier, before Christmas. That means no answer through the holidays, through New Year's, and straight into late January with nothing coming back. That's why Breanna Stewart's recent comments raised eyebrows. She said they're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But it's hard to see any light when the other side hasn't even replied to your proposal in over a month. Something better, but remember, Breanna Stewart yesterday said, "Oh, they're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel." How can you see the light at the end of the tunnel? You liar. Whatever. In that proposal, the union is seeking a 30% share of the league's gross revenue and a salary cap of $10.5 million. The league's latest proposal includes a max base salary of $1 million, which would increase to more than $1.3 million with revenue share. The league's proposing roughly 70% of its net revenue over the span of the deal. The salary cap would be at $5 million in year one and would grow in. This isn't momentum, it's a dead stop. And while talks go nowhere, front offices are stuck guessing. General managers still don't know the rules for the expansion draft. Toronto Tempo and Portland Fire are trying to build from scratch, but without a CBA, they're basically blindfolded. One of the biggest sticking points is a proposed core designation, similar to a franchise tag. That single rule could flip the entire expansion draft, deciding which players are protected and which ones are left exposed. League insiders say the absolute best-case scenario for free agency would be early March, and that's only if a new CBA gets finalized by early February. We're days away from February already. That leaves maybe 2 weeks to reach a deal, clean up the language, and get signatures. After that, the rest of February would be eaten up just trying to organize and run an expansion draft. That's nowhere close to normal. In a typical year, free agency opens in early January and most of the big moves are done by early February. This cycle is completely off the rails. Training camp is locked in for April 19th. The draft is April 13th. Everything is stacking up with no room to breathe. Here's the real risk. If a deal doesn't happen soon, it may not turn into a full strike or lockout right away, but the league could be forced to delay the season or quietly cut games. 44 games might turn into 38 if the start gets pushed 2 weeks. Push it a month, and you're looking at 34. The WNBA has never lost games to a labor stoppage in its 29-year history. The next 2 weeks decide if year 30 becomes the first. And that loops back to the real pressure point, unity. Right now it's sitting at 97%, but what happens when it slips? 90, 80, 65? They may not re-vote on strike authorization, but the noise behind the scenes will reach leadership. Star players will start to notice that half the league no longer backs the strategy, and that leverage they're counting on starts to fade. Now look at who's carrying the weight. Role players are being asked to risk their financial stability so top names can push for max contracts. Players at the end of the bench may never touch those top salaries. What they could see is base pay jumping from $80,000 to $250,000. That's life-changing money for a 12th player on the roster, but it only matters if there's actually a season to play. When income dries up, real life doesn't slow down. In the middle of free agency, front offices will also be preparing for the 2026 M Draft, currently held April 13th. The hard truth is this: the league has more leverage than many players want to admit. Of course, it needs the athletes, but it can also wait. It has backing, it has resources, it can survive delays better than the average player can. And the league knows it. That's why the union's proposal has been sitting unanswered for weeks. Time is doing the work for them. Pressure doesn't hit everyone evenly. It hits the middle and the bottom first.
When the 10th player on a roster can't cover a car payment, questions start forming. When the 11th player starts worrying about housing, loyalty gets tested. When the 12th player is stretching groceries because savings are gone, it becomes clear who's actually feeling the pain. And at that point, the idea of unity starts to feel very different than it did on paper. That's the moment everything starts to fall apart. Not because the league suddenly improves its offer, but because the players run out of runway. That's the strategy the league is betting on. Wait it out. Let time do the damage. Let financial stress chip away at unity until it can't hold together anymore. It's not warm or fair, it's deliberate and it's likely effective. The league understands the math. It knows pressure doesn't land evenly. It hits hardest on the players who can least afford to wait. And once enough of them start feeling squeezed, the group stops moving as one. So the real issue isn't whether players deserve better pay. They do. That part isn't up for debate. The real gamble is whether they're willing to risk the progress they've already made by holding out for a deal that may not land. If talks slide into March, then April, if games start getting pushed or erased from the calendar, the tone changes fast. At that point, hindsight gets loud. Players may look back and wonder if a strong offer slipped away while chasing something closer to perfect. And they'll say, damn, we're not really united anymore. These girls fractured and they don't agree with it anymore, and they're kind of starving, and they need to pay for this, and she needs to pay for that, and let me know what you guys think in the comments. That's when doubts spread. Do role players start stepping out of line? Does leadership keep the group locked together? Or does this standoff turn into a delayed season where nobody really wins? This is where everything converges. Not in the boardroom, not in a press release, but in the quiet moments when players check their accounts and realize time isn't neutral. It's a weapon. And right now, it's aimed straight at the middle and bottom of the roster. The league doesn't have to rush. It can sit back and let reality do the work. Every unpaid bill, every delayed decision, every unanswered proposal adds weight. Eventually, the conversation stops being about leverage and starts being about survival. That's when positions soften. That's when unity turns into tension. Nobody walks away clean from this. Either the players take a deal that isn't perfect, or they risk stalling the very momentum they fought years to build. A delayed season doesn't just cost games. It costs fans, sponsors, and trust. And once that's gone, it doesn't come back on command. This next stretch decides everything: the deal, the season, the balance of power moving forward. If you want to stay ahead of what's really happening behind the scenes, follow Courtside Leaks. No spin, no headlines, just the pressure points that actually decide how this ends. We've got every angle covered, every leak, every backstage twist, every moment they won't show you. Hit like, subscribe, drop a comment, and share this video.